Welcome to the Deep Dive. We cut through the noise, get you straight to the core of the latest research. And today, we're diving into something genuinely surprising, often overlooked, actually. It's this really intricate connection between chronic pain and, well, your memory. It's not just about the physical side of things. There's a profound mental toll, too. So our mission for this deep dive, we're going to unpack the insights from a brand new systematic review and meta-analysis. It's by Kelly and colleagues. And this research, it really challenges what we thought we knew. It reveals how different types of chronic pain can uniquely impact how well your memory works. Forget wading through dense papers or giving you the shortcut, You'll get the surprising facts, the practical insights, everything you need to be informed. Okay, let's unpack this thing. We're talking about chronic pain. What does that actually mean? Well, it's defined as persistent pain, experienced on most days of the week, lasting for more than 3 months. So it's not just a fleeting thing. It's a constant companion for so many people worldwide.
Absolutely. And its reach is, well, it's truly pervasive. In many developed countries, like, say, Australia, where a lot of this data comes from, nearly 1 in 5 adults experience it. And that number is actually increasing. Think about this. A huge chunk, like 40% of early retirement there, is linked to chronic pain.
Wow.
Yeah, so this isn't just about individual discomfort, right? It has massive societal economic implications. Big deal.
That's such a crucial point. Often when we hear chronic pain, we immediately think physical sensation. But what this deep dive really highlights is its profound effect on, well, psychological well-being, social connections, and, critically, our cognition. Our memory systems seem particularly vulnerable. Things like the pain itself, obviously, but also fatigue, medications people take, lack of sleep. Imagine trying to learn something new when your brain is constantly, battling pain signals.
Exactly. And while older research did link chronic pain broadly to cognitive issues, there wasn't really a consensus on how or why different parts of cognition, especially memory, were affected. That inconsistency made it really hard to offer targeted support. And that's the critical gap this new study by Kelly et al. Aims to fill. It looks beyond just chronic pain as one big umbrella term.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
This study introduces a core idea. Not all chronic pain is created equal. Lumping it all together. So what are these different types? How do they actually differ?
Yeah, that's the fundamental question. So the first type is nociceptive pain. This is probably the one most people understand best. It results from actual tissue damage, trauma, inflammation, that sort of thing. Think musculoskeletal disorders, rheumatic diseases. It's usually localized, might fluctuate, and people often describe it as aching or throbbing. It's your body signaling something's physically wrong.
Okay, makes sense. Tissue damage pain. What's next?
The second type is neuropathic pain. Now, this is nerve-based pain. It stems from a malfunction, maybe a lesion, somewhere in your nervous system, peripheral or central. It can come from chronic nerve conditions like diabetic neuropathy, MS, or even sometimes as a side effect of healing after an injury. It's like faulty wiring, dysfunctional communication in the nerves.
Ah, okay.
People often describe it quite differently: burning, shooting, pinching sensations, and it's often linked with hyperalgesia, increased sensitivity where even a light touch can be painful.
Right, nerve pain. Got it. And the third one?
And the third one is nociplastic pain. This is perhaps the newest category. The term itself only really came about in 2016. It describes conditions like fibromyalgia, where the pain is very real, absolutely, but there's no obvious physical origin, no clear tissue damage or nerve lesion. It involves, well, altered function of the brain and the nervous system's sensory pathways. This tends to make the pain more diffuse, more widespread, and honestly, diagnosis is often based on exclusion, ruling out the other types first.
So understanding these three, nociceptive, neuropathic, and nociplastic, that's really central to getting what this study found, right? It's a whole new lens compared to just saying chronic pain.
Exactly. And to really understand why they might differ, we need to remember that all pain, whatever the type, is ultimately processed in the brain. Brain imaging shows us there are these widespread networks involved in the whole sensory experience of pain. But what's fascinating and crucial here is the overlap between these pain processing areas and the regions involved in, say, emotional processing like the amygdala and cognitive processing like the prefrontal cortex.
So it's not like one single pain spot in the brain.
Not at all. It's a network.
And that network overlaps with our thinking and feeling part.
Precisely. That overlap helps explain why cognitive problems and emotional difficulties are so common with with chronic pain. And we also see, interestingly, that people with chronic pain often show more widespread brain activation compared to someone with, say, acute pain from a brief injury.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if we dig a bit deeper, especially with neuropathic and nociplastic pain, we see specific physiological differences. For instance, in the brain's higher centers, the cortex there seems to be heightened activity in areas that perceive pain. But, kind of paradoxically, there's less activity in brain regions that normally inhibit pain. And these inhibitory areas are also critical for our executive functions, focus, planning, making decisions.
Whoa, so the brain's own pain control system isn't working as well.
Kind of like the brakes aren't fully engaging.
Right. And those same parts are needed for thinking clearly.
Exactly. So if those areas involved in attention, working memory, decision-making are constantly being, dysregulated by the pain signals or the faulty inhibition, well, it's not really surprising that cognition suffers. We also see hints of changes in brain chemistry neurotransmitters. Some signaling molecules might be overactive, others underactive, especially, it seems, in nociplastic pain. Plus, some imaging studies even suggest slight structural variations in gray and white matter depending on the pain type.
So anatomical and physiological differences too.
Potentially, yes. It points towards that.
Okay, wow. So all this complex brain science is really crucial background. It helps explain why cognitive symptoms, especially memory ones, might be so different depending on the kind of pain someone has. It's not just a uniform effect.
Absolutely. And when we talk about memory specifically, this study looked at 3 core systems. First, you've got short-term memory, STM. That's your conscious, active memory, very limited in time and how much it can hold. You need to actively rehearse to keep info there, like remembering a phone number just long enough to dial it.
Right, the immediate buffer.
Exactly. Then there's working memory, WM. This is a bit more complex, more of an active frontal lobe thing. It's about manipulating information you're holding in short-term memory. So like mentally calculating a tip or following multi-step instructions. It takes more mental resources.
Okay, STM is holding, WM is working with it.
You got it. And finally, long-term memory, LTM. This is your vast storehouse, supposedly limitless in capacity and duration, but it's not conscious storage all the time. It's where info is filed away and retrieved later, remembering events, facts, skills.
And we know, just anecdotally and from older research, that people with chronic pain often report memory problems, right? They talk about having trouble recalling things, concentrating.
Oh, definitely. Those subjective complaints are very common. Brain fog is a term you hear a lot.
Yeah.
And what objective testing often shows is that while implicit memory things you remember automatically, consciously, like riding a bike seems mostly okay, it's the explicit memory tasks, the ones requiring conscious effort and attention, that really seem to take a hit. This suggests the cognitive resources being constantly drained by the pain primarily impact those effortful memory processes.
Okay, so let's get to the study itself. What does all this actually mean for someone living with chronic pain, or maybe for the clinicians treating them? This review, Kelly et al., it pulled together 15 good to strong quality studies. That's what, over 1,800 participants in total?
Yeah, 1,865 participants, so it's robust data. They compared each pain type, nociceptive, neuropathic, nociplastic, against healthy control groups.
And what did they find? What were the actual results?
Okay, so the findings were quite distinct for each type. For individuals with nociceptive pain, that tissue damage pain, the analysis showed significant deficits in short-term memory. The effect size was large, which is quite substantial. They also found significant deficits in verbal long-term memory, with a moderate effect size compared to the healthy controls.
Okay, so nociceptive pain hits STM and verbal LTM. What about the nerve pain, neuropathic?
Right, now here's where it gets really different. For neuropathic pain, the results showed no significant deficits in short-term memory or working memory compared to controls.
No significant difference.
Not statistically significant, no. Now, they couldn't fully assess long-term memory for this group because there just weren't enough studies looking at it specifically for neuropathic pain. But for STM and WM, a very different picture compared to nociceptive.
Interesting. Okay, and the third type, nociplastic pain, like fibromyalgia.
For nociplastic pain, they found significant deficits in both short-term memory, again, a large effect size, and working memory, with a moderate effect size compared to healthy controls.
So similar to nociceptive for STM, but hitting WM instead of LTM in the studies they analyzed.
Exactly. And again, like with neuropathic, there wasn't enough data to draw firm conclusions about long-term memory, specifically for nociplastic pain in this meta-analysis.
Wow. Okay, so the central takeaway here seems crystal clear. The type of chronic pain someone experiences really significantly influences their specific memory performance. This just throws out the old idea that all chronic pain affects memory in the same general way, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It really challenges that generalized assumption. And the implications for clinical practice are huge. Healthcare providers really need to understand the specific type of pain a patient has, not just diagnose chronic pain. Because knowing the type helps anticipate potential cognitive impacts.
Right.
So for instance, with individuals experiencing nociceptive or nociplastic pain, where those STM and/or WM deficits were found, tailored support is crucial. This could mean things like providing information in shorter chunks, simpler language maybe, encouraging them to bring a support person to appointments, or offering information in written or even recorded formats they can review later at their own pace.
That makes sense. Practical strategies.
And it also reframes things like, challenges with sticking to medication schedules or doing prescribed exercises. Maybe it's not just non-compliance. Maybe it stems from genuine cognitive difficulties related to their specific pain type.
That requires a shift in perspective from the clinician. Definitely. More empathy.
Exactly. And ultimately, it just reinforces the need for really holistic pain management. It can't just be about pills. It needs integrated support, psychologists, physios, occupational therapists, looking at the whole person.
That really does sound like a much more comprehensive, patient-centered approach. What about the implications for future research then?
Yeah.
Where does this lead?
Well, this study really paves the way. It strongly suggests future research should investigate cognitive performance based on pain type, taking a symptom-based approach rather than just looking at specific diseases like arthritis or diabetic neuropathy.
Focusing on the pain mechanism itself.
Precisely. It reinforces that idea that pain happens in the brain, but adds this crucial layer of nuance. Different types of pain seem to engage brain pathways differently, leading to different downstream effects on cognition. It encourages a much deeper dive into those specific pathways.
And it's important to stress, I think, that this research doesn't mean previous studies were wrong. It just adds layers. It encourages a more nuanced, comprehensive view of how living with chronic pain impacts everything: physical health, mental well-being, cognition.
Exactly. It builds on what we knew and refines it.
So the big aha moment from this deep dive is pretty clear, isn't it? The type of chronic pain you experience, whether it's nociceptive, neuropathic, or nociplastic, really determines its specific impact on your memory. It tells us loud and clear, not all chronic pain messes with your thinking in the same way. Now, for you, our listener, here's something to chew on. How might a more precise understanding of these different pain types and their unique cognitive footprints actually transform patient care? How could it revolutionize support systems, maybe even reshape our everyday interactions with people we know who live with chronic pain? What further questions does this deep dive spark for you about this incredibly complex link between our physical sensations and our mental world?